Hello YouTube. In this video I'll be sharing my collection of 7.62 by 25 Tokarev handguns from the communist bloc and Cold War era. Before I get to those guns, I need to show you the firearm that was being replaced when the Tokarev design was implemented. This here is the 1895 Nagant revolver. It fires a 7.62 by 38 millimeter round, which is roughly a 98 grain bullet at around 1,000 feet per second. I've heard that some surplus is more like 1,200 feet per second, but I haven't tested that myself, and a lot of commercial is really anemic at around 800 feet per second, so it's not a very powerful cartridge. And one of the unique things about this that you probably already know, but this is a gas seal design, and that is the reason that you see the bullet is recessed down under the case neck, case mouth. And that is so when you load it and fire, the cylinder moves forward and seals up against the forcing cone. And so you get no gas leakage here, and they did that to try to increase the performance of the round. On pretty much all revolvers, you have this gap that doesn't move and you lose gas out of each side, and that gives you less velocity than you would get normally. One plus that they say is that this is one of the only revolvers that can actually be suppressed, since you can close that gap. Otherwise you would always have that noise coming out of there no matter what you did up here. And the Russians and Soviets did do that. They did have some that were suppressed. This is a Tula made in 1939. It's pretty nice. These were really common years ago. When I first got into guns around 2012, these were in crates at gun shows for anywhere from $80 to $120 with a nice holster and the whole deal. These are all the ones that came in like that I know of were refinished. The typical Russian dip blue, real deep, you know, it's not pretty, it's not shiny. And they did put new grips on them. These are those brown Bakelite, I believe is how you pronounce that. The trigger on this is extremely heavy. It holds 7 rounds in the cylinder, and it is incredibly slow to load and unload. So when this went into service, it was already outdated because there were other designs where, you know, the cylinder could swing out. You could load several rounds at once or use a speed loader. On this, you have to load 1 round at a time, manually rotate the cylinder, load another round, load up all 7, and then you're ready to go. But once you fire them, you have to unscrew this, pull this out, rotate this over, and push down and eject each piece of spent brass individually. And this is not spring loaded, so you're having to push in and pull out for each one. And it is incredibly slow. Imagine doing that in a gunfight or on a horse. Although this 1895 Nagant served well into World War II, it was already showing its age when it was introduced, and it definitely was by the early 30s, and the Russians started looking into replacing it with a semi-auto design. I do not have an actual Russian surplus Tokarev, but the closest thing are these Polish guns. Basically, all your 8-round Tokarevs that you'll find on surplus are exact copies, but most of them have straight slide serrations. But the Polish guns have these scalloped slide serrations like the original Russian models. In the 30s, Fedor Tokarev was working on developing this. They came out with one in 1930 called the 7.62 Tokarev self-loading pistol model 1930. They updated it along the way, and this was called the TT33 when it was finally done and they had everything the way they wanted. This is a short recoil operated handgun that relies heavily on the Browning design. It fires the 7.62 by 25 Tokarev, which is a bottleneck cartridge, and fires a roughly 85 grain bullet at a velocity of up to 1500 feet per second, according to some military manuals and testing. Most of the commercial ammo that you're going to find will be more like 1200 to 1300 feet per second, because I've chronographed a bunch of it and I've never seen anything hit 1500. But it is a pretty powerful round. These are of course much quicker to load and unload than the Nagant revolver. They use an 8-round magazine, and as far as I know, all the 8-round magazines are interchangeable between the different Tokarev designs. One reason I don't have a Russian model is because of the import ban on Russian firearms in the United States. It's a lot harder to find a Russian model, especially one in good shape, and you're going to pay a large premium for it. Of all the Tokarev pistols that I have handled, these Polish guns are the most well made. These look a little dull because they have some grease on them, but this is a really nice bluing job. I believe these were refinished at some point, but I'm not sure. But the Polish guns, you know, they just stand out. I really like the Circle 11 marking on the top of the slide there. Again, these were a lot more common around 2012 to 2014. Southern Ohio Gun is where I got these two. I think they were around $240, $250. And I have not seen Polish ones on the market in several years. So if you want one of these, you're going to have to go to the secondary market or gun broker, something like that. Another unfortunate result of import laws is the requirement of added safety to all of these. A Tokarev only has a half cock as a safety originally, and so the ATF required them to add these additional safeties to them, which meant drilling a hole through each side of the frame. The Polish ones actually look quite nice and function pretty well, but some of them are really rough looking the way they added those. They just didn't really take much time. You can see the similarities to the Browning design just by looking at this. It uses a barrel bushing just like a 1911. It has a barrel link down here that the slide stop goes through. Takedown is very similar. I have seen some people remove these safeties to try to make their guns look more original. Some people with good welding experience can patch those holes and re-blue it, and it looks pretty nice. I even saw a guy plug his with JB Weld painted black, and it actually looked decent. But I figured I'll just leave mine as they are. That's how I like to do it. Okay, so that is it for the Polish guns. Very nice. These are, like I said, the nicest that I have. And I believe the most well-made of all of them, even over the Russian ones. You can really tell in the machine work and fit and finish that these are just a step above the others. Okay, now you can see my Romanian, called the model TTC. Besides the slide serrations here, it's basically exactly like the Polish model, even down to this safety. These are still available. I saw some at AIM Surplus the other day for $220, and I would definitely suggest picking one of these up. They're incredibly fun guns to shoot. They may look a little awkward, but they actually feel really comfortable in the hand. If you have big hands, the grip may be a little short for you, but the Yugoslavian models hold 9 rounds instead of 8 and have a longer grip, and that's actually my favorite one to shoot because of that factor. The muzzle blast from these is pretty massive. It's just a real joy to shoot. The recoil isn't bad, but it just kind of feels like a hand cannon when you fire it. It's really fun. Unfortunately, on these guns, the bore diameter varies quite a bit, and most ammo that you find will have 308 bullets, and some of these slug all the way up to 312. My dad's Romanian has a 312 bore, so you may not get the best accuracy from factory ammo, and you may want to reload, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Fortunately, even if you have one with a fat bore, it will still shoot good enough to just plink at steel. You just might not want to expect a tack driver unless you're going to reload or have someone load you up some ammo with some fatter bullets. Now I'm going to go into the takedown on these. It's kind of hard to do behind the camera here. There we go. So you have to pull that back, and that's what holds on to the other side of the slide stop. So then you pull the slide stop out and hold your hand up here so that you can capture this recoil spring. So I'm not going to take this down further, but you can see the swinging link a lot like a 1911. The guide rod's a lot like a 1911. The barrel bushing rotates over and comes out just like a 1911. And then you will see the big difference from this in the 1911, which is this hammer package that's comes out all in one piece. It actually has feed lips on it. It's pretty neat design. It makes it really easy to clean and to work on the trigger. If you want to, you can get in here and polish just by taking a couple pins out. There's the inside of the frame. Nothing special. The trigger moves straight back just like a 1911, and all that this safety does is block the trigger. So then reassembly, stick that back in place. Okay. Back through. Make sure your barrel bushing is lined up. And then push this back to lock it in place. And that's it. The triggers on these are usually not great, but they're serviceable. You can do a little polishing work that will help a lot. The Romanian guns are pretty well made. I really like mine. It's just not quite to the level of the Polish gun, but it is definitely worth your money. If you are looking for one of these, it's really a good time to grab one if they're still available at AIM, because these are only going to go up in value. There were a lot of other countries that made these, including China, Hungary, North Korea, and Yugoslavia. I do have some from Yugoslavia, and I'll show you here in a little bit. All these that I'm showing you here today are curio and relic, all the way from the Nagant revolver up to when I get to the CZ52. Okay, here's one of my Yugoslavian model 57. These have a longer grip and hold one additional round. This is the Romanian. This is the Yugo, and you can see how this grip is longer. These use a 9-round magazine. I believe the Yugo mags will work in the others, but the 8-round mags will not work in the Yugo. The Yugos were real easy to find years ago, but I haven't seen them around much lately. These do have a magazine disconnect. It's very easy to remove. There are videos on YouTube about how to do it. This one looked unissued when I got it, but I have a shooter that I paid much less for. I think I got this from Southern Ohio Gun. I believe it was around $230, but I got this one as a shooter grade for $170. On this one, I removed the magazine safety. I put this little grip sleeve on that, just ignore that. You can see the safeties are much uglier on the Yugos compared to how the Polish and the Romanian guns were done. I never used the safety on it. It's just a range gun, so it doesn't bother me too much. As I said before, this is my favorite one to shoot because of the longer grip. You can see on the other one, you know, it only came down to about here, but this one just fits my hand much better. The Tokarev served the Soviet military until 1952, when it was replaced by the Makarov pistol. Romanian guns were produced from 1952 to 1958. The M57 Tokarev in Yugoslavia was made by Zastava, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that right, and it was in service from 1957 to 1992, but they do still make commercial models of these. They also make a slightly smaller one in 9mm and a lot smaller one in 32 ACP. None of those are curio and relic though. I believe Classic Firearms has some of these right now, but they are commercial models that are used, so they don't qualify as curio and relic. Like most Yugoslavian and Serbian guns, the fit and finish isn't as great on these. The machine work isn't real great, but they're built like tanks and they work just like every Yugo gun that I have pretty much. You know, you'll see rough machining marks and they won't be pretty, but they are worth every penny. The Tokarev design can easily handle 9mm, and I have seen conversion barrels and bushings for these. They don't currently make them that I know of, but if you search around you might be able to find one used, but expect to pay more than you want to. Okay, this is the CZ Model 52. They made about 200,000 of these from 1952 to 1954. They were in service from 1952 through 1982, when it was replaced by the CZ82 in 9x18. The rumor on these was that they used a roller locking system so that they could use higher pressure ammo in them. I never verified that. It seems like just a rumor to me, but I do know that someone tested a lot of these and they would actually fail before a broom handle Mauser, which was made for an even weaker cartridge. And the reason for that is the roller locking system leaves a thin spot in the chamber, and that would be the part that would fail. I just showed you there, pulled down on this, and this whole slide comes off. And here you can see your roller locking action. These two rollers will push in, and then the slide will be allowed to cycle. It's a pretty unique design. It's very interesting. It's fun to shoot because that roller lock gives it a really weird recoil impulse. It's really smooth. They're just a blast to shoot. These do have a couple weak points, but they are very nice handguns. They're well made. They're funky looking, but the two major weak points are the firing pin and the decocker. The firing pins were made of a cast material that has been known to crack and break, especially if you dry fire it. So if you have one, don't do that unless you replace the firing pin with a modern replacement, which are easy to find. If you have one of these, do not rely on the decocker when it is loaded. Make sure you have it pointed in a safe direction, because these have been known to fire when you decock them. These use an 8-round magazine that are nothing like the Tokarev magazines, as you can see. This one here that I'm showing you is unissued. I got this, it was one of the last batches that came in the country, probably 2015 or so. and they had a bunch of these that just were never issued. You can see the year 1954 when it was made. Most of them will have another year over here somewhere, which is a rebuild date. They went through and refurbished these. But since this one was never issued, it was never rebuilt. It's all matching. Very nice. There are a couple weird spots here in the parkerization. I'm not sure what happened there, but it was like that when it arrived. That gun I do not shoot. And here's my shooter. This is the first one I got, and I actually got this off of Gunbroker. I didn't know much about these when I bought it, so I didn't notice that this one had been Duracoated. But it looks okay. On this one I did a trigger job. I went in, replaced the firing pin with a Harrington Products firing pin, which is a hardened steel. I saved all the original parts so that I can return it to close to normal someday if I wanted to. These can also handle 9mm, and there are conversion barrels out there. As with the Tokarevs, they are not currently made, but you can find some on the used market if you look. The Czechs were interesting. They were part of the communist bloc, so they were required to use the same guns and ammo as the Soviet Union, but they wanted to be different. And you saw with the Makarovs, the Czechs had the CZ82, which was a very good improvement over the Makarov, which only held 8 rounds, whereas the Czech design held 12. And the same went with these. They didn't want to use the Tokarev, so they designed their own gun. This is one of the rare instances where the Czech design is not superior to the Russian design, just due to the couple weak points of this gun. These look way more awkward than they truly are. Another aftermarket part I got was this magazine floor plate, and it helps me a lot because, as you can see, it gives me a purchase there on my pinky, and it makes this feel a lot better in the hand. These are pretty easy to find. I think Apex makes them. Another downfall or downside of the CZ52 is the heel style magazine release instead of the regular as the Tokarevs have. The negatives that I mentioned, I hope that doesn't scare anyone out of getting one of these, because if you do see one for a decent price, I would jump on it, because these are only going to go up in value. They were only made for 3 years. They're Czech made, which seems to always command a premium in the surplus market. And they're just a unique design, so I think they will go up in value. There were 200,000 made. Who knows how many of those came into the US? But if you see one these days around $350 or less, I think that's a pretty good deal. I got the unissued one for $380 back in 2015, I think. And this Duracoated one, I think I paid $350 for or so in 2014. May have been a little high on this one, but I didn't know it was Duracoated, so not a big deal. It's just a shooter. Now I'll just mention a little bit of history, and sorry you're just going to be staring at guns here. But I showed you Yugoslavian, Romanian, and Polish Tokarevs. I have 2 Yugos, 2 Polish, and 1 Romanian. And then I have 2 of the CZ52s. The Polish, the Romanian, and the Yugoslav Tokarevs are probably the 3 most common here. The next is probably a Chinese Tokarev. There are some of those around. They also have them in 9mm. Many Tokarevs were used all the way up into the Vietnam War, and due to the fact that we cannot currently import Russian firearms, a lot of the Russian Tokarevs that are in the US were Vietnam bringbacks and are in pretty rough shape, and they still demand a premium. One thing I'm definitely jealous of Canadians for is their availability and prices on Russian surplus. They can get Russian Tokarevs, Russian SKSs and SVTs. Pretty common and way cheaper than we get them. Where they may pay $300 or so for a Russian SKS, we're looking at $800 or more. So they definitely have us beat there. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about reloading for this cartridge. Okay, reloading for the 7.62 by 25 can be a bit of a chore depending on how many guns you have and what their bore diameters are. One of the most important things you need to do first is slug the bore on your gun. Find out if yours is nice and tight, or if you have a really loose one like my dad's Romanian that comes out at 312. A lot of the ammo you're going to find is going to be loaded with 308 bullets. So you may need to reload if you're really wanting good accuracy. I think besides paying a bunch for a custom die set, Lee is really the only ones making these right now. I could be wrong, but I think that's right as of the last time I looked. And there is a known issue with these Lee dies. My dad and I both got unlucky with ours. The sizing die does not squeeze in the body of the brass enough, and they will fail to chamber in all of my Tokarev design guns. They will chamber just fine in the CZ52s because they have a bit more sloppy of a chamber. And I went through a bunch of pain trying to figure out what was going on, and I finally figured that out. So what I do is I run them through this 7.62 sizer, and then I run them through a 9mm sizer just to squeeze that body in that last little bit so that it will chamber. I talked to Lee about this, but they were not responding in any kind of way that I wanted to deal with them. They wanted me to send them fired brass and all kinds of stuff. So I just deal with it with that extra step. So bullet selection is going to be your most important thing. Slug your bore and then find bullets that will fit it properly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about bullet selection. As I said, slugging your bore is incredibly important. You may have a nice tight one that you can use 308 diameter bullets in, and in that case, you're lucky. One of the best groups I ever got testing these guns off a bench was with this 30 Mauser bullet made by Hornady. It's an 86 grain, soft point round nose. And as I said, it is only 308. So it's not going to work well in guns with a loose bore. Another 308 bullet that has worked well for me is just a regular old 110 grain full metal jacket made for the 30 carbine. One that I have gotten real nice results with as far as a cast bullet is this 309 115 grain Bayou bullets. You can contact them online, just search for Bayou bullets. They're coated with, I believe, the high-tech coating, and those shoot real well. And another one that I really like is this 309 90 grain XTP by Hornady. These shoot really nicely too, depending on the gun and the bore diameter. The ones that are even fatter or more loose in their bore diameter, I have to shoot some larger bullets in, and I have casted my own, sized them in as fat as 312, and got some decent results. You can also buy some custom cast bullets online if you search. They have some bullets that are made just for the 7.62 by 25. Okay, I'm looking through my reload notes here. I spent a couple months testing a bunch of different 7.62 by 25 reloads, and I wanted to talk about powder choices. Some of the ones I tried, accurate number 7 It worked okay, but you had to use a decently stout charge or you end up with a ton of unburnt powder. I tried Unique. It did okay. It wasn't my favorite. My favorite powder that I ever tried with the 7.62 by 25 is Surplus WC820, which is pretty much impossible to find these days. Something that is extremely close is H110. Just keep in mind that, as with the Accurate number 7, you're going to need a decently stout charge, or you're going to end up with a bunch of unburnt powder. Accurate number 9 can also be used. For the heavier bullets, it's really hard to find load data for, so I'm just going to tell you a couple of my loads that worked okay. You're responsible for your own safety. These worked in my guns, they may not work in yours. The 115 grain lead Bayou bullet, I used 7.5 grains of Accurate number 7 and all the way up to 8.8 grains of Accurate number 7 with no pressure signs. The best was probably 8.5 grains. For that 115 grain Bayou bullet, I used 9.4 grains of WC820. I went up as high as 9.8, 9.9. I think my best was 9.6 grains of WC820, which would be pretty close to H110, so just keep those loads in mind if you're going to go for some fatter, heavier bullets. For the 110 grain full metal jackets, I used from 7.9 to 9.0 grains of Accurate number 7 with no pressure issues. So I hope that helps somebody that is thinking about reloading for this. One of the main negatives about reloading for this cartridge is all these guns launch the brass into next week, and it gets really frustrating hunting your brass down. So if you have some kind of brass catcher or net you can set up, it's going to help you a lot. I find myself these days just grabbing steel cased ammo to use in these so I don't have to worry about it. I really like the Tula steel cased, and I've also tried the Red Army standard, and those both worked well. For brass cased ammo, Wolf Gold works fine, but it is just reboxed PPU, and the PPU it's exactly the same head stamp. So if you see Wolf Gold cheaper than PPU, definitely grab it. It's the same thing. S&B is nice. Of everything I've chronographed, the S&B had the highest velocity. And Winchester also loads it from time to time, and I have some of that ammo, but I have not shot it. So that is it for my 7.62 by 25 collection. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. I got a new microphone and used it in this video. Hopefully it helped. I have a few more handguns from this time period that I'll probably bust out another video for them. And then I might go on to rifles if you guys want to see them. So thanks everyone for watching. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.